Oh, goody! We've got ourselves another big story, people! Well, this gap between races is turning out to be quite interesting, eh? Because this time around, Carlos's dad has actually spoken out about running for the FIA president's job, instead of rumours. Yes, unlike the previous chatter around the likes of Susie Wolff or Robert Reid, Sainz Sr has spoken out publicly, not a rumour, then denial later. I mean, I didn't expect the Carlos Sainz revenge arc to take this kind of a twist, albeit from Carlos's own dad. Because when this interview dropped on motorsport.com, this being an exclusive, people were already reeling from the Doohan, Colapinto, Oaks, Briatore, Alpine drama from yesterday. Two-time World Rally Champion Carlos Sainz Sr, father of F1's Carlos, of course, revealed he is seriously considering a campaign for FIA president. He's been thinking about it for a while too. And now he's putting out feelers to see if he'd actually get anywhere. And what makes this really compelling is the background of Carlos Sainz Sr. He is a bona fide living legend, whilst Mr. Sulayem, as some people may put it, is merely just a leg end. Mr. Sulayem often reflecting on his rallying days and saying, hey, I'm just like you, even though he retired in 2002 from active competition, whereas Carlos Sainz Sr, he's still going. I don't think you can compare Mr. Sulayem to Carlos Sainz Sr, a guy who has won the WRC twice and the Dakar Rally a total of 4 times, the last time being last year when he was aged 61. This is the first high-profile campaign that we have seen. Everything else up until now has just been hearsay, rumours, discussions, debates. I mean, Motorsport UK's David Richards would do it, but since under Sulayem's tenure, it conveniently the age range went up that you had to be under the age of 70 to be eligible for the presidency gig. Well, imagine that! Richards couldn't run. And the timing of all this is absolutely brilliant, because after the whole V10 thing went up in smoke, because I personally think that was Mr. Sulayem's first attempt to use his brand new consolidated powers to push for a change that he believed was right, and then got completely kicked into the grass, this could easily set up more debates about there being tensions in the FIA's future. So here's exactly what Carlos had to say on the matter via motorsport.com. Ahem. There are plenty of reasons for putting myself forward, but I have been driving for more than 40 years and this sport has given me everything. This possibility of being president has been in my mind for some time now, not very deeply, but now I think it could be the right time in my career for me to take the step. I'm confident I can do a good job and put together an excellent team to give back to the sport part of what it has given me. I've accumulated a lot of experience in this sport throughout the years, and I'm certain I can bring new and interesting things to strengthen and develop the sport and the automobile world. Everybody has his own way of running an organisation, his own beliefs on what is best, and his own way of understanding this sport and the world of mobility. I think my track record shows that when I'm committed to something, I only know one way to do things, which is professionally, seriously, and straightforward. Then it will be up to the community to decide. And I know that many of you will immediately cry foul at this news, even more loudly than with the Wolff rumours, and point out that Carlos Sainz Jr is an active F1 driver, a director of the GPDA, and part of his entourage. But we'll get to that. First though, I want to really unpack what this actually means and why Carlos Sainz Sr, when you really step back and look at this all, is a really good candidate. Sure, he doesn't have any bureaucratic experience or what it takes to be behind a desk, because to be fair, Mr. Sulayem has had that experience since 2005. The fact of the matter is though, is that right now there is a call for change, much like how there was a call for change back in 2021 after the whole Abu Dhabi incident of Michael Massey. There were demands for things to be turned around, and Mr. Sulayem answered the call against Graham Stoker. And then the only thing that then got stoked after that was just controversy after controversy after controversy, followed with a little bit of his self-insertion. So I can give you easily 6 reasons why I think Carlos Sainz would be pretty good for this job. First, and this is a pretty big one, and I think this will be very much touching a nerve with Mr. Sulayem, Sainz's rallying pedigree, completely outclasses Ben. Like I've mentioned, he's won 2 WRC titles and 4 Dakars, succeeded with Citroën, Audi and Ford, to name a few. It's just a proof of adaptability across technical cultures. Like his son, he thrives in new environments. Second, unlike Sulayem, who did retire in 2002, Sainz is still active in racing. He's immersed in modern motorsport, from hybrid powertrains to safety systems. Sainz has first-hand experience with his Ford Raptor this year at the Dakar Rally. It sustained a spin. After the second stage, he was ruled out of further competition because the FIA deemed his car unsafe for further competition. That proximity to the rules does give him some legitimacy amongst other competitors, and people who are actually in this sport, rather than a guy who hasn't actually been in an active rally competition since, well, the 2000s. And third, this is compounded by him still being active. He is still relevant within the world of rallying, him having the nickname El Matador. He's celebrated in Spain and Latin America as the nation's greatest ever off-road racer, and gave the country its first title in the Premier Rallying category, which had been up to that point dominated by the Nordic countries, with the occasional cameo from Italy. Public affection can translate into some sense of power inside the FIA General Assembly, because that's where the wind is blowing. Because I can easily imagine that the FIA's delegates will be looking at what's going on online and then just trying to read the room like, hey, this Carlos guy does sit well with the general public, and we are trying to win favour again with the public, which right now is at an all-time low, so maybe this guy, he, like his son, could be a smooth operator. And it does help that he has been around the block. Sure, he has been competing for about 40 years, as he said, and he is in his 60s, but he isn't too old because, well, Mr. Sulayem can't use age against him because I believe they are both the same age, and that under 70 rule, that no longer applies. And would go some way to explain why David Richards, even though he's not eligible, he has said on record that he would be backing Robert Reid should he decide to then put himself into the ring, because Robert Reid is under 60. Fourth, his leadership style, Carlos's, is known for being meticulous and professional. Like he said in his statement, he does things professionally, seriously, and straightforwardly. Engineers have praised his methodical note-taking and nightly debriefs, habits of total commitment, which surely instills some confidence that, even though he can't really rule the roost himself, he would find the right people to help delegate and therefore have a really active team, a good environment. You know, instead of ruling impulsively or trying to consolidate power, so that means he alone is in charge. No, I don't think Carlos would do that. Fifth, Carlos is multilingual. He understands what it takes to be in active competition because he knows what it takes within sponsor boardrooms and in parc fermé conditions since, again, he is still active in rallying. So I can imagine that him being able to adapt to certain environments and circumstances would easily go down well. One day he has to be a diplomat, one day he has to muck in with a rallying crew. Therefore, he can easily try and relate to all sorts of walks of life, including those who are in charge of the commercial side of things within motorsport. Put simply, he gets it. And sixth, his pledge to give back by listening to drivers, teams, and fans. It positions him as an empathetic leader, not a bureaucrat, something that many feel the FIA is currently full of, bureaucrats. These traits of Carlos's, global success, technical fluency, professionalism, soft power, it gives his outsider bid serious credibility. And okay, yes, we will get to that particular buzzword that has been around for a while, conflict of interest, because any snifter of a real campaign from Carlos Sainz Sr. is immediately going to be then going back to what his son is doing in Formula One, Carlos Sainz Jr. Because his son is a driver for the likes of Williams. Any act that he may impose could easily be seen or construed as nepotism. And I don't think Carlos Sainz Jr. being a co-director of the GPDA alongside George Russell is really going to help assure people. In that same interview, he insisted that he would step back from travelling with his son to race weekends and that the FIA is a very serious entity and there will be no conflict. He points out that his son is no longer a youngster, he's been around F1 for about a decade or so, therefore he no longer needs his old man by his side. If anything, their relationship may change under a presidential regime. Yet perception does matter, because there could be complex FIA discussions regarding budget, safety concerns, future regulations. Anything could easily be considered as giving Williams an advantage or something like that, because we're only looking to what's going on to 2026. So say if Carlos Sainz Sr. is successful, he's voted in as the brand new FIA president. We're going into a brand new set of technical regulations where things could easily change. And Williams right now, them stopping active development this year, them looking likely, if they can get the rules right, to be right up at the front. If Carlos Sainz Jr. is staring at a world title, he is at least being a contender for a while, then his dad being in charge of the entire widget of the governing body that governs Formula One, yeah, people might just suddenly say, oh, he's only in the hunt because his dad's in charge. That would cheapen anything that Carlos Jr. can do. It would not be a smooth operation whatsoever, it would be a rather jagged one. And besides, the FIA's history, it's been riddled with examples of favouritism. Remember the old acronym for the FIA? Ferrari International Assistance? And then circling back to nepotism and the whole situation with Dad. And may I remind you what happened with the Wolves and Mr. Sulayem going after Susan, the whole conflict of interest thing, which then got completely smacked down within hours? Yeah, it didn't go anywhere, but it still happened. Sainz Sr. pledged to step down from any role advising his son may appease many federations within the FIA, but skeptics will still watch this move closely. Yeah, I could easily imagine that these hypothetical foams of doubt could easily come up in any questions or scrutiny from anyone asking Carlos Sr. any questions as to how would he run his FIA, what would he do, and who would he be more likely to benefit and then punish? You know, the whole adage of rewarding your friends and punishing your enemies. And the fact that Carlos Sainz Jr. is a co-director of the GPDA, that is going to come up as a question too. But hey, on the plus side, if the FIA decides to run with it, then it could easily streamline driver feedback, because as we know, the GPDA has long expressed their concerns that the FIA simply doesn't listen to them, that they're not being taken seriously, that the opaqueness regarding fines and where they go is a real hot topic with them. And of course the whole swearing thing, which many people thought, well, okay, maybe the GPDA got some kind of response with Appendix B, but arguably, it made the situation even more constrictive. It made it worse, even though Mr. Sulayem has now gone on to say that, oh, he might water down Appendix B a little bit, or maybe give the stewards more scope to maybe look at other things like community service, far less impunitive or something like that, because he's probably realised that that appendix is not popular, and I think that they can't rescind it during an active season in Formula 1, so they have to wait until the winter if they wish to amend it further or get rid of it entirely. You know, it's just start a fire and then partially put it out, and then suddenly tell the world, look everyone, we put the fire out, like us, even though we started it. With Carlos Sainz at Williams, the president could hear cockpit concerns fast, potentially speeding up change. It would also send a strong trust signal. Having a GPDA voice in the president's family unit could be symbolic progress. Broader FIA categories like the World Rally Championship echo these calls, so a presidency in tune with the GPDA and the WORDA might energise driver engagement across disciplines. You've got to admit, the World Rally Drivers Association has been really effective in trying to hammer home the concerns of drivers, even more so than the Formula 1 drivers, because, hey, they managed to lean into what Mr. Sulayem is, because, hey, if he wants to be going, hey, I'm a rally driver, just like you, I can relate, well, they're going, well, okay, relate to us then. We're rally drivers and we don't like what you're doing. Credit where it is due here, but if this were to go ahead and Carlos Sainz Jr. retained his co-directorship of the GPDA, there are some risks with this plan. Critics will refer back to the last time that father and son were somewhat connected. During John Tott's tenure, his son Nicholas was an active individual within motorsport. So therefore, there is a precedent, and the FIA's own ethics code demands separation and transparency. Because if this were to become a formal campaign from Carlos Sainz Sr., many people will look back to those days as some sense of a warning that entanglement of familial ties could easily spell some sense of doom or scrutiny, or negative feedback from many circles around the world. Throughout the 3 terms of Jean Tott's presidency, there were many concerns that kept up about what would Nicholas Tott's presence as being a driver-manager mean in terms of fairness and stuff like that. And then let's not forget, Jean Tott, before he became the FIA president, was in charge of Ferrari during their golden era. You know, mutterings of Ferrari favoritism, the Ferrari international assistance now laid bare by a guy who was the team principal of Ferrari, Nicholas Tost being a manager of Charles Leclerc. And then let's not forget the 2019 controversy over the oil burn at Ferrari, which was not dealt with formal punishments, but a backroom agreement, which then saw 2020 arguably have Ferrari punished even worse, as well as Alfa Romeo and Haas, because, well, that season was terrible for them. It still left a cloud over that presidency, which ended in 2021. It was not a fully perfect execution in terms of father-son links. There were just rumblings all the time. It never was really quiet. So therefore, constant recusals and reassurances of saying, look, we are not going to be communicating with one another in that sense, everything will be fine and above board. It will seriously impede and undermine anything that Sainz Sr. might be able to do, because there would be that question mark of, oh, well, how's that going to benefit Carlos Jr. then? But then at the same time, the FIA president isn't elected by teams or drivers or fans, but by the General Assembly. National motorsport federations, each country with 24 votes. This often gives emerging nations equal weight to motorsporting giants. Sulayem holds a strong hand here, backed by many Middle Eastern, Asian and African federations. And may I remind you about that whole thing about when the FIA Audit Committee was then disbanded? 2 people were sacked because they were querying as to where certain funds and fines were going. Many people speculating that maybe those fines were being siphoned over to certain federations to try and get the assurance and vote for Mr. Sulayem. Of course, this has never been fully confirmed, but, you know, the Times' piece on it, that was pretty interesting. And then you could easily say that Carlos Sainz Sr. is coming in with similar credentials, him having a huge amount of support within European, African, and Latin American regions, as well as the fact of having rally pedigree. So Ben Sulayem can't just say that because, hey, Carlos is just like them. In fact, he competes with them. But the real challenge is that whether or not Carlos Sainz Sr. can actually get through to the block that Sulayem has established and maybe try and erode it a bit, or maybe eliminate it entirely. While teams and drivers don't vote, their sway is indirect but significant. Many F1 teams have grown frustrated with Sulayem's unpredictable leadership, and his recent public comments on perhaps scrapping the cost cap, as well as attempting to upend the 2026 power unit regulations with that V10 thing, and the disciplinary crackdowns and then walkbacks have ruffled feathers. They've either come across as him trying to spout out things that he thinks will be popular amongst the fans, or a way to try and consolidate powers, which means he can then instill change himself. He doesn't have to go through committee after a committee. He can make snap decisions there and then because he says so, which with the V10 thing completely failed. And what better than Carlos Sainz coming in saying he is looking for more transparency again, better communication, understanding all kinds of global motorsport? This is exactly what everyone's been craving at the moment. As long as I think he is looking to uphold certain things like the cost cap, because I personally believe it has been good for Formula One in that the smaller teams can catch up to the bigger teams, there isn't a furious case of overspend, and then the smaller teams having to overspend themselves and then potentially put themselves out of business. And then of course the GPDA, the WORDA, they've openly clashed with Sulayem, particularly over the FIA's clampdown on language, demanding to be treated like adults, instead of how Mr. Sulayem likes to treat them, as his own children. With Carlos Sainz now involved in the GPDA, Sainz Sr. has a unique opportunity to build goodwill with drivers in a genuine sense who have felt ignored. George Russell has summed it up as well, that drivers want real change. And Sainz Sr.'s pledge to listen to those people could resonate powerfully here. And then there are the fans. Because I don't think you need me to tell you that there has never been a time, as far as I can remember, that the FIA has been seen so negatively across the spectrum of people who actually watch motorsport. Because without people watching motorsport, there wouldn't be motorsport. And this was really hammered home, I think, at F1 75, where just the logo of the FIA was booed spectacularly, even more so than when Christian Horner rocked up on stage. It's deeply unpopular, the FIA, and has sparked criticism and even online abuse, which I think at the moment the current administration is trying to snuff out entirely or censor or delete comments, instead of trying to find ways to genuinely reconcile with the fandom, as in making popular changes which will benefit the sport instead of being all hip and cool and spontaneous and harking back to the good old days to try and really, tug on the member berries. And therefore, it's not gone down well with the fans because it looks like a smackdown rather than a genuine peace offering. And I believe that somebody like Sainz Sr. could easily see a popular surge because people recognise him, people are fans of his and his son, and therefore that could really take a hold in regions of the world like Latin America, South America, where rallying is really popular. This is the kind of thing that they would want to feel, more representation. And I have seen in my own comments that people who hail from Latin America, South America, they don't feel represented, that their ways of trying to get into motorsport are chastised or mocked or, I don't think you need me to tell you about the whole Franco Colapinto thing and the Checo thing. I'm trying to the best of my ability to understand you. They're perfect, but I'm at least gonna give it a go. And sure, this soft power from the fandom, it might not win ballots directly, but it could sway federations wary of backlash, or further backlash. In essence, Sainz is pitching himself as a bridge builder, someone who brings experience, listens to discontent, and resets relations with teams, drivers, and the public. And I think the next thing he needs to do is try and position himself as a person for genuine change and someone who is not going to be tearing the FIA apart, and that there would be some sense of continuity or a better future. Because we are going to be getting this election here, people, so therefore there are going to be smear campaigns, or the other candidate may be painting a picture that may not necessarily be true. It will heat up, with Mr. Sulayem's camp expected to frame the contest as a choice between continuity and disruption. Sainz not understanding how politics actually works like he does, Mr. Sulayem. Because even though there has been plenty of controversy during Sulayem's tenure, they will most likely point to the successes, the good news stories that we have seen, like the reforms within the WRC, the support from emerging nations who otherwise didn't feel represented amongst previous presidents, and let's not forget, the expansion into other markets and territories, which admittedly was the responsibility of Liberty Media, and the commercial side of Formula One, less so the FIA. So therefore, he would be saying, well, I've done all this change, I can easily do more in a second term, so why would you want to do anything else? He'll also probably point out to Sainz Sr.'s inexperience in terms of being an administrator, because being a driver, there are simply things that he would not understand, and that Mr. Sulayem does understand. Sainz, however, is positioning himself as a fresh, grounded alternative. He argues that someone who has raced at the top, the pinnacle of rallying and won it twice, understands the real needs of drivers, teams, fans and promoters far better than what a bureaucrat can do who's not been in active competition for decades. Carlos's message is rooted in listening, collaboration and steady reform, offering a contrast to Sulayem's headline-grabbing style, trying to garner popularity through headlines which do sound popular on first reading, but when you really get into the nitty-gritty, it's just wholly impractical what he's trying to say. But in any case, if Sainz Sr. is serious here and formulates a formal run for the presidency, he immediately outdoes the credentials of Mr. Sulayem because, again, Carlos Sainz Sr. is a living legend in the sport and universally popular. Instantly, he would diminish Sulayem's claim to fame. He could easily and more effectively garner support from areas of the world that really hold rallying dear. These areas of the world will look to him with great concern and seriousness, as the WEC reportedly are going through a new set of regulations for 2027 in terms of the pyramid scheme or something like that. I'm not a rallying fan, I don't know it all by detail, but it is a major change. Like in F1 for next year, we get the 2026 regulations, so you want to make sure that these regulations go through rather smoothly, and I think Sainz is the one to do that because, well, he understands what the competition is all about at the moment. Nevertheless, Sulayem remains a formidable incumbent with deep-rooted backing across the Middle Eastern region and Asia. And other regional blocs often shape FIA elections, and challenger like Sainz, he has to transform this into an issue-driven campaign rather than do what Eurovision has been notorious for doing since it began, just voting for your neighbours in your same block. So therefore, if Carlos is going to get anywhere within this presidential campaign, he has to appeal to a worldwide audience. He can't focus on just the big territories to garner support. He has to focus everywhere. He has to make sure that their interests are taken seriously and he, Sainz, takes them to heart. He has to show actionable change, which is practical, cost-effective, and will benefit the sport. And then you're probably wondering, well, okay, how much support does he actually have? Well, unfortunately, and not surprisingly, the way the FIA really tries to garner how popular a certain candidate is incredibly vague. But there could be signs, get it, about how popular he may be if he conducts meetings with certain delegations and federations, who actually turns up, and who then comes out to support him publicly. Then you might start to get an idea as to how legitimate this campaign may be. Meanwhile, Sulayem is expected to campaign aggressively, leaning on his accomplishments and global outreach. And judging from his previous comments, he would welcome any challenges. It's not like he's trying to snuff them out, but there just haven't been any as of late. Up until now, he's been looking likely to win by default. But Sainz's own words alone, instead of hearsay, shifts the political dynamic already. Because him even just announcing that he's considering a presidential bid, it changes the narrative entirely. It makes it all about governance reform, transparency, driver-focused change. Even now, it's going to be a question that Mr. Sulayem will have to field if he is going to get that confidence amongst the General Assembly. And if you get a popular rallying driver who is still competing to this day in very prestigious events against an incumbent whose rallying days have long since departed him, but he still clings onto for dear life, it's clear, it's night and day here. There is no contest in terms of public perception. The optics are important here, and Carlos Sainz Sr., wins by a landslide. And even if Mr. Sulayem wins a second term against Sainz Sr., there will be more questions regarding his presidency. There will be more calls for accountability, transparency. He's not going to have an easy ride if he gets his presidency through 2029. But ultimately, this may become a referendum on what kind of leadership the FIA needs. Sulayem's continuity and ambition versus Sainz's grassroots credibility and reformist tone. A strong campaign could mark a really pivotal moment here, where lesser federations, the drivers, the teams, may feel like they could genuinely have a seat at the table rather than be told by the current presidency saying, shut up, do what you're told, I know what to do here, I'm in charge. Much like how Lando Norris is perhaps demanding his seat at the McLaren table not be moved further away, as he sees his seniority matter not with a potent Piastri alongside him. To find out what Lando Norris needs to do to try and regain some control at the team that he thought was his for the longest time, watch this video next, straight after this one.